So definitely gonna keep. Even though we've got two tooth and nails, birds into witness isn't the worst. We can rebuy fetch land if we have to. Um, so this is basically a medium hand, and it looks like all right. Here's a steam vents into Delver, so we're up against Delver. Um, and there's a Xenagos. So I think I'm just gonna fetch for a basic forest here, rather than play out the stomping grounds. Just to preserving our life total could be relevant. And let's see if our opponent can. Yep, our opponent's able to flip right away. So lightning bolt's gonna get flipped. And there goes the birds. That's unfortunate. That's a good sequence from our opponent. Even though they've missed a land drop. That's still a solid amount of pressure. What we'd actually really like to draw here is Emrakul. We already have Xenagos, so if we're able to put in without needing to entwine the tooth and nail, if we're able to put in Xenagos and Platinum Empyrean, that would actually be good too. So we found the Empyrean. And I am going to play Eternal Witness here. Our opponent's stuck on one land, so even so, we're still in a lot of danger of just dying. We've already seen one lightning bolt. If our opponent has another one, that would be bad. I'm going to get back the birds. We would like another way to ramp out because we may just die with these tooth and nails sitting in our hand. This Delver is a very solid clock that is being presented here. So we're going to go down to 9 at least this turn. And, okay. And we're going to... So our opponent doesn't have much besides this Delver going on. But it's unclear. The Delver might just be good enough. So I'm going to get in with the Witness. Now we can potentially have up to 6 mana next turn. Okay, never mind. The birds is going to get bolted. So we'd really like... I mean, we've got some good draws here. There's some cards that can remove the Insectile Aberration, but the Forest, that's really not a good draw. So we could play Xenagos here. That seems bad. Still going to do it, I guess. So we can hit our opponent for 4. If we draw something like a Thragtusk, that would be great. We could give it haste and then potentially deal our opponent lethal. If our opponent has another bolt, though, we're just dead. And there's the second land. So now our opponent might have access to a counterspell or something like that. But in any case, that Delver is going to get it done. So turn 1 Delver followed by flipping it and then having a couple of bolts. It turns out that's pretty good. So looking at how we want to board, our opponent doesn't know exactly what we're doing. So we do have that going for us. I think we want to board in a grindy package involving Harmonizes and probably the Obstinate Balos, the Sudden Shocks, and the Primal Commands. I think Blood Moon against Blue-Red Delver. The issue is if our opponent just has one island, it's not that great. I think we want to board out at least one. I'm fine with shaving on Madcap. Birds is another card we can potentially shave on. But I think we do shave on. We could just cut all of the Blood Moons here, but I think we cut on birds. Probably cut a Garruk. And we can still take our opponent by surprise with turn 2 Blood Moon. So I think I like all of these cards. Boseiju is another option we can go to. I like that. So I'm just going to board out a forest for Boseiju. And actually, I think we just cut the Voyaging Satyrs in this matchup because we know that our opponent has Bolt. We would rather have these 1-mana ramp spells than be relying on Voyaging Satyr, if that makes sense. So I'm going to submit this. And sure, I'm willing to keep this. We have a Sudden Shock, so that is a way of dealing with Delver, the card that beat us last game. And then Overgrowth is a good way to help get out these bigger cards. So this doesn't seem like it should be that bad for us unless our opponent has that unanswered Delver. So I'm hoping that this Sudden Shock does go a long way, which in theory it should. And there's a Boseiju. Not going to play that just yet. I'm going to keep the Sudden Shock available to us. And there's a basic island. So if we had Blood Moon here, our opponent would have the basic. It's definitely an important card to keep in mind. And our opponent's got 2 mana up, which is definitely worrisome. I think we want to just go for the Overgrowth, though. And I'm going to put it on the forest. So if our opponent has something like a Mana Leak or Spell Pierce, then that's fine. The Overgrowth gets countered. Alternatively, if they don't, then it's going to help us get out some of our other big spells. So it looks like it's going to be a remand. Okay, that's fine. So we can just recast the Overgrowth next turn, potentially. And there's a... Okay, so our opponent also has Ghost Quarter. So Ghost Quarter, it's a way to disrupt the Overgrowth, actually. So that's something to take into consideration, but our opponent may not actually want to do that. So I'm going to use the Wooded Foothills. And we can put an Overgrowth on the mountain, or we could put it on... Sorry, we could put it on the forest or the mountain, I should say. I think I like putting it on the mountain. Yeah, let's go with that. So now we can go Arbor Elf plus Sudden Shock away the Delver. That seems pretty good. And if our opponent does Ghost Quarter away the mountain, we still get to search for... We get to search for another forest, and then we're pretty close to Thragtusk anyways. A little bit further from Hornet Queen. But it's unclear that our opponent's actually going to use the Ghost Quarter because they may want that land themselves. Oh, wow. Here's a Stone Rain. So that's going to get rid of our mountain. That's actually really bad news. Was not expecting that one. So Stone Rain takes care of the mountain. Now we can follow up with Boseiju, but unclear that that's going to be very good here. Because both of the cards we want to be casting are creatures. Our opponent's got 4 cards in hand. They might be scared of enough of the Boseiju to want to get rid of it, though. Alright, there's Volcanic Upheaval. Wow, so our opponent looks like sideboarded in a bunch of land destruction, but we actually drew Madcap. So I'm just going to cast it. And we found a Platinum Empyrean. So we'll see if this land destruction is actually going to be a good enough plan against us. Because now we've got Platinum Empyrean. So our opponent's also going to need an answer to this. If they are going to if they're going to win this game, they're going to need an answer to this Platinum Empyrean. And there's not that many answers that the blue-red deck can present besides cards like Vapor Snag would be good. Cryptic Command to bounce it. Bounce spells would definitely be good. Other than that, I think it's unlikely our opponent has any artifact destruction, although we've already seen volcanic upheaval and stone rain, which is a bit ridiculous, to be honest. But sure, our opponent boarded those cards in. So they've kind of taken the land destruction idea to the next level. And at this point, we're kind of all in on Platinum Empyrean for the most part. Thragtusk is a backup plan. Hornet Queen, I don't think we're going to be able to cast it this game. Spellskite, sure. We actually drew an Overgrowth, which, by the way, for Game 3, assuming we get to a Game 3, I am boarding these Overgrowths out. So this appears to be a chump block on the Platinum Empyrean. So that's fine. I'm going to go for an Overgrowth on the Forest. Even though, who knows, our opponent may have access to more land destruction, and we know about the Ghost Quarter already. So if our opponent has something like Snapcaster Mage plus Stone Rain would be a huge blowout. But we still have the Platinum Empyrean. That's the plan here. Still the plan. So, yep, there's Snapcaster. So that's bad news. It's going to be Stone Rain. And our Forest with Overgrowth on it is going to be gone. This is a really funny game. Land destruction is... it's actually good in Modern. But, it's frustrating too. It's very frustrating. There's a Sudden Shock. We could actually just Sudden Shock away the Snapcaster Mage. I think we want to do that. Although, I guess we don't have to. Alright. I'm going to do it. And this makes the Platinum Empyrean a 2-turn clock now for sure. So hopefully our opponent has run out of gas for the most part. Alright, there's a Utopia Sprawl. This is really funny. So we're going to get in there. Alright. Looks like that worked out. So, is this Platinum Empyrean really going to finish this game off? That's the question. It could. It certainly could. That Madcap Experiment was a really clutch draw. Alright, our opponent's going to cycle Electrolyze. They would need, if they had double bolts or something like that for the Empyrean, that would get rid of it. And that would be really annoying. But even if the Empyrean dies, we can still maybe get Thragtusk into play next turn. But it looks like the Empyrean actually got that game done. Was able to finish that game. So looking at the sideboard now, we know that our opponent has land destruction. I'm going to board back in that extra land, board in these Mana Dorks, and take out the Overgrowths. We saw too much land destruction to be anywhere near comfortable with Overgrowth. And Utopia Sprawl has a very similar vulnerability. So I think we might want to also take out the Utopia Sprawls, but they are one of our best cards against most matchups. So, and they're a 1-mana ramp spell. We're going to take out the Blood Moons on the draw. Definitely want this Madcap. And then probably Garrick. So yeah, I guess we can keep in the Utopia Sprawls, but I think Overgrowth as a 3-mana card is just way too vulnerable. So I'm gonna go with this. And so we're on the draw. If our opponent, I mean, we're in a vulnerable situation. Our opponent's playing a very weird deck. A very weird version of Blue-Red Delver. We've seen a lot of the classic elements, and then this land destruction package has really thrown me for a loop. Not something that I would normally be expecting out of Blue-Red Delver. Sure, maybe a Stone Raid or two, but not two different land destruction spells. That's a little much. And we're lucky that we can still afford to board out our Overgrowth and have a bunch of mana sources. So we see here a hand with a lot of mana sources, but that being said, our opponent has removal for the mana dork. So this could be a bolt. Wouldn't be surprised. Yep, there's the bolt. So next turn we're going to play our other Arbor Elf, but we've seen cards like Electrolyze, like Stone Raid, so it may be that we're not able to play this Harmonize on turn 3, even though that's clearly what we would like to do. So I'm going to play the Arbor Elf first, just in case our opponent has Remand, which we've already seen. So if our opponent does Remand the Arbor Elf, we can simply replay it, and if they don't, then we can just play a Stomping Grounds. But it looks like it's not Remand, it's Mana Leak. So we're just going to be on the slow plan. We have lands. So I don't actually think this is bad for us, considering our opponent has no clock. And it looks like it's just going to be moving towards the late game, but we've boarded in some of our bigger spells. And Harmonize could be really good for us. So our opponent is not going to play Stone Rain this turn. That's good news. And so the question is, we drew Arbor Elf. The question is, do we simply play Harmonize now? Our opponent's got 5 cards in hand. Or do we wait on it? I think I like playing it. Sure, our opponent could have a counterspell, but we've already seen 1 Mana Leak, and if we let our opponent have another land, that's going to give our opponent access to Snapcaster plus Leak. So I like trying to go for Harmonize. It didn't work. Our opponent had another counterspell. So now we can actually go all the way up to Xanagos if we want to. And I kind of like getting that card into play. We'll see if our opponent has a counterspell, first of all, and second of all, if they feel it's worth using on Xanagos, because we don't have a creature in play that's really going to threaten our opponent right now. But, okay, so there's a Remand. That makes sense. It's basically just delaying the Xanagos. So we'll see if our opponent can actually just counter every single threat that we have, which is, it's possible. I mean, the Blue-Red deck, the Blue-Red Delver deck, tends to have a lot of counter magic. And there's a Stone Rain, so that's going to take care of a Stomping Ground. Wow, Thragtusk, that's actually quite a good draw. Thragtusk is what we were... It's one of the cards we really wanted here. So I think we just play it. So even if our opponent bolts it, we still have the beast left over. So this is going to require some work in order to get rid of. I would love it now if our opponent just taps out for something, but we'll see if that actually happens. Oh, wow, here's an Anger of the Gods. So, Anger of the Gods, it's still going to get us a beast. And now... Alright, there's a Utopia Sprawl. That's not a bad draw. Our opponent's got 3 cards in hand. Could be more land destruction in there. But I still like playing out the Utopia Sprawl. And going for Xenagos as well. So now we can 6 our opponent. And so Xenagos plus Beast Token is an avenue to win, but I don't think it's good. I think our opponent likely has something like a Snapcaster or another 3 damage spell to get rid of the beast. The Ghost Quarter, our opponent could use that in order to get rid of the Utopia Sprawl. So I think we want to just go ahead and see what our opponent does about the beast here. And it looks like potentially taking 6 is what our opponent's going to do. Maybe? We'll see. Alright, there's a Cryptic Command. So that's going to bounce the beast and draw our opponent a card. That makes sense. So I'm just going to go ahead and commit the birds and the Arbor Elf now. So we're in an unfortunate spot where our opponents played 4 counterspell. I mean, basically all of our opponent's cards seem to be good against us. So there's a Volcanic Upheaval, basically a Stone Rain. That's going to get rid of the forest. And that's going to be a little bit of a setback. But there's an Obstinate Baloth. That could be a good card to work alongside Xenagos with. So I'm just going to play it. And if our opponent has a mana leak, more power to them. Or remand, but it looks like that Obstinate Baloth is going to resolve. So we definitely want to try to give it haste. And then we have 9 damage coming across now. So that was a pretty important draw. And it looks like our opponent can't do anything about that. So now I think we're in a great spot. Without the Obstinate Baloth,